Before I get to the direct step-by-step process of this whole video, I want to tell you a quick story. The first time I ever properly smoked was at the age of 13 when my friend gave me my very first vape. Of course, that did not really tip me over the edge as I very rarely used it and it wasn't such a big problem. Once I moved countries, I ended up moving to a European area where smoking was very prevalent and everybody had been vaping or either smoking. This video will of course cover both vaping and smoking and other forms of nicotine if you want to quit that, but let's get back to the story. I got my very first vape at the age of 16 and I started consistently smoking for nearly a year straight. This is where I picked up some very nasty lung problems such as feeling little balls in the back of my throat and coughing literally non-stop, and I decided to put a stop to it. This was my very first time quitting smoking and I was successful. Not after my first try of course, but after countless attempts I ended up quitting smoking for probably 2 years, where I did enjoy it once in a while with my friends at parties and such, or when I hung out with people who did, but I never got back onto smoking. A couple months ago, I got back into the habit and I could not kick it for probably a month straight. This is where I decided to try to quit smoking once more and really make a detailed plan of how I was going to do it and execute it. At this point, it has been nearly a month since I had last smoked, and following my plan was quite easy and very manageable, even though the cravings and such were very tough. So how was all of this done? Well, first of all, I highly recommend you check out Andrew Huberman's video on dopamine and the other video on nicotine and addiction. One thing you need to realize is nicotine by itself is not bad for you. What is unhealthy though is the toxins you get from smoking. So if you want to keep on getting the buzz from nicotine, you could easily switch to a nicotine gum or pouches and stuff like that. But if you want to completely cut it out, such as I did, as I don't really want to be influenced by any drugs within my life, I don't even drink coffee almost year round. And when it comes to this, I'll tell you exactly the action steps you can take, starting from my very first time that I managed to quit smoking. My very first time, I didn't really have a complete detailed step-by-step process, but I managed to eliminate it by replacing it with a better habit, which was exercising. At this point, I was hitting the gym consistently and I decided to go on a cut. I replaced my smoking cravings with cardio, and without realizing it, I managed to play my dopamine system, which I ended up doing a couple months ago, but the first time I did it was very unintentional. I managed to quit smoking and I was very clean until I started smoking again a couple months ago. I think this is the part of the video that you came for. So how did I quit smoking again? This time I went through a very detailed step-by-step process. What you realize is that when you are addicted, when you smoke, it peaks your dopamine. Your dopamine goes up and then it comes crashing down below baseline, which induces your cravings after a while again, as you need to stabilize your dopamine or get another peak again. This is more thoroughly covered within Andrew Huberman's podcast of nicotine and the dopamine episode. Highly recommend you go check that out, as I might make some errors. I'm going off like slight bro science, but it does all scientifically make sense at the end of the day. What I managed to realize is that the cravings for smoking were not essentially for nicotine itself, but it was for the rise of dopamine that you get from nicotine. So in my head, I thought, okay, if I'm going to quit smoking, how is there a way that I can replace the dopamine I would get from smoking with something else? As once you realize, if you get a dopamine peak that is high enough, you do not want to do the previous activity. Why is it that you don't want to smoke as badly once you actually smoke? It's because your dopamine goes up and then you are satisfied. I don't really think it's the nicotine that fulfills the craving process of your brain, right? It's all about the dopamine. So you want to introduce some good dopamines in your life, such as last time what I managed to do is replace it with cardio. Of course, that's not going to give you as much dopamine in the moment as smoking, but it did slowly replace it. And this is what I did not know the previous time. This time, I have already been working out and doing cardio quite frequently, but that was not replacing the dopamine hit I was getting from smoking. So I had to take things to a different level. Look, if you cannot get yourself to exercise, find a vice that is not as bad as smoking, but that will raise your dopamine to a decent extent. For some, it may be sex. For some, it may be video games. For others, it may be social media or junk food. Let me tell you from personal experience, quitting social media or quitting video games is far easier than quitting smoking. So if you can find a way to get a dopamine hit from something else that is not smoking, within the first 2 weeks of you quitting, you will make drastic progress and it becomes stupidly easy to quit your addiction. So here would be my step-by-step process if I was going to quit smoking again. right? Let's say I'm vaping every day. Vaping is, by the way, much worse for you than smoking cigarettes is, as the nicotine you get and basically the dopamine that you get from vaping is much worse than cigarettes. So let's just get one thing out of the way. Vaping is actually much more closer neurologically to smoking crack than it is smoking cigarettes. So think about that. If I'm smoking again, this is what I would do step by step. I would first throw all my stuff away, right? Throw all of my smoking equipment away, and then wait until I get the urge to smoke. Now, once you get the urge to smoke, try to hold off on it as long as possible. If you really feel like you're going to smoke again, try to drop to one of the vices that will give you fast dopamine. A lot of people are against this, but if you're trying to quit a heavier addiction, it is far easier to drop from a horrific high dopamine source to one that isn't as bad, but still isn't too good for you. So once you get the craving, you acknowledge it and do something that would fulfill the craving. Let's say you want to smoke, but you know that all your buddy wants is the dopamine. So instead of going to buy a pack of cigs or buying yourself a vape, or buying more vape juice, buy yourself junk food. If that gives you the same amount of dopamine as smoking, it will cure the craving for a short while. That could be a day, it could be a couple of hours. Yes, you are making a short-term sacrifice for long-term health benefits. It might be hard to get through your head, but if you follow through with it, you will see how fantastically it works. Another quite controversial thing that you could do is if you feel a craving for dopamine, that craving for smoking, you can get quick dopamine from something like masturbation. Yes, at this point we're coming to figure out that porn and masturbation is horrific for you. You could replace it with sex, but I doubt your girlfriend is going to you every time you get smoking cravings. And by the way, it's much easier to quit a porn addiction than it is to quit smoking. So you might want to consider one of the two things, right? By this point, you should most likely understand that the way to get rid of a smoking addiction is to make sure that you get dopamine from something else. I'd also recommend incorporating a pretty healthy lifestyle, as that will over time manage your dopamine levels and not have them just plummet to the ground. As with every rise, there is an equal and opposite crash to dopamine, which is what scientists have pretty recently figured out. So what's going to happen is if you keep on giving your body more and more dopamine, that's even more hardcore than the smoking that you're getting, eventually it's going to plummet all the way to the ground, and it's going to be very difficult for you to do anything else. So I'd recommend to use this as a tool. I'm giving you a very powerful technique here. Don't use it in the wrong way. Don't use this as an excuse to just like smoke, jerk off, and eat junk food all day. You need to use this as a tool with the intent to quit smoking. It worked wonderfully for me, and I mean wonderfully, twice in a row. It has been quite a while since I last smoked. My cravings are just down, like my cravings are atrociously low now, and I'm super grateful that I discovered this technique. If you want to get my free step-by-step plan for exactly what I did, press the first link in the description and I'll email it to you right away. But yeah, if you try this out, drop a comment down below on how it worked. This might not work your very first time. Of course, quitting smoking does take many attempts, but this has been the technique that has worked the best for me. So yeah, if you have any success, drop a comment down below and I'll see you next time.